What if every rejection you've ever felt wasn't the end of your story, but the beginning of something nobody else could see? What if the silence after that goodbye, the one that still echoes in your chest some nights, wasn't emptiness at all, but a room being cleared out to make space for something bigger? Stay with me for the next few minutes, Pisces, because something is shifting for you right now. Something quiet. Something most people around you haven't noticed yet. But you have. You felt it in the way your sleep has changed, in the way old conversations suddenly don't hurt the same way, in the way you've started staring out of windows a little longer than usual, like you're waiting for something you can't quite name. You're not imagining it. You have always felt things more deeply than the world gave you credit for. People called it too sensitive. People called it too much. And somewhere along the way, you started believing them. You started shrinking the parts of yourself that felt the most, because feeling that much in a world that moves that fast made you feel like the odd one out. You remember the friendships that quietly faded, not with dramatic endings, just silence, a message left unread, a birthday that went unacknowledged. You told yourself it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered every single time. You remember being the one who showed up, with soup when someone was sick, with a listening ear at 2 a.m., with forgiveness even when you weren't the one who was wrong, and somehow still being the one left standing alone when you needed it back. You remember rejection that didn't come with an explanation, a job, a love, a dream you built quietly in your mind for years, only to watch the door close without so much as a reason. Nobody talks about how exhausting it is to keep an open heart in a world that keeps handing it back bruised. But here is where the story turns. Picture for a moment an old wooden pier stretching into a grey, restless ocean. The wind is sharp. The sky doesn't know yet whether it wants to storm or clear. A single figure stands at the very end of that pier, coat pulled tight, watching waves that refuse to calm down. This is where we find you, symbolically, not literally stranded, but standing at the edge of something. Behind you, a life that no longer fits. Ahead of you, water so vast and unclear that it's tempting to turn back toward the shore you already know, even if that shore was never kind to you. The wind picks up. Somewhere behind the clouds, sunlight is trying to break through, but it hasn't yet. Not fully, not visibly. And this is the part almost nobody tells you about growth. It rarely announces itself with fireworks. It announces itself with wind, with discomfort, with standing at the edge of a pier, unsure, but still standing. Because you are still standing, even after everything. Maybe what looked like failure was actually protection. Sit with that sentence for a second, because I don't want you to rush past it. That relationship that ended in confusion, the one that left you wondering what you did wrong, what if the ending wasn't a punishment, but a redirection away from a future that would have quietly consumed the very things that make you you? What if that job that rejected you, the one that stung for weeks, was actually the universe pulling you out of a room you were never meant to spend your life in? I'm not telling you this is fact carved into stone. I'm asking you to consider it, as a reflection, as a possibility, as a lens that might finally let some light into a memory that's been sitting in the dark for too long. Because here's something psychology has known for a long time, long before anyone dressed it up in spiritual language. The brain remembers rejection far louder than it remembers redirection. We're wired to relive the sting of a closed door far more vividly than we imagine the better door that opened quietly down the hall. So of course the pain feels louder. It was never designed to be fair. It was designed to keep you alert. But alertness isn't the same as truth. And the truth, Pisces, might be softer than the story you've been telling yourself. Let's go somewhere else for a moment. Picture an old journal, its cover slightly worn at the corners, sitting untouched on a windowsill for months. Dust has settled faintly across it. Inside are pages filled with plans that never happened, dreams that got interrupted, sentences that trail off mid-thought because life pulled you away before you could finish them. Now imagine finally opening that journal again, not to grieve what didn't happen, but to notice something strange. The handwriting changes halfway through. The tone shifts. The person writing in the final pages sounds steadier than the person who started it. Wiser, quieter, but stronger. That's not a coincidence. That's you, becoming someone the beginning of that journal could never have predicted. Delays are not denials. Sometimes what feels like life making you wait is actually life making you ready. Think about the moments you thought you'd never survive. The morning after a heartbreak so heavy you couldn't imagine getting out of bed. The silence after a friendship ended without warning. The ache of being misunderstood by people who were supposed to know you best. You survived every single one of those mornings. Every single one. And near the end of this, you'll understand why this particular moment, the one you're in right now, today, watching this, matters more than you realize. Let's talk honestly about abandonment for a second, because I think it's time someone did. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being the emotional caretaker of every room you walk into. The one who senses tension before anyone says a word. The one who softens conflict. The one who remembers what everyone else forgot. And in return, so often, the world forgets to check in on you. If you've ever cried quietly so no one would hear, if you've ever comforted someone else while falling apart internally, if you've ever smiled through a conversation while grieving something nobody knew you were carrying, I want you to know that none of that went unnoticed by everyone. It was noticed, just maybe not by the people you needed it from. This isn't about blame, it's about understanding. Because once you understand why certain people couldn't show up for you the way you showed up for them, something inside you softens. Not because it excuses the pain, but because it releases you from carrying it forever. What if that closed door wasn't punishment? What if someone else's rejection of you became the very thing that set you free? I want you to actually consider these questions instead of rushing past them, because your mind has likely spent years assuming the worst version of every answer. What if, just for tonight, you allowed a kinder version of the story to exist alongside the painful one? I'm not going to answer these questions yet. Not because I'm withholding something from you, but because some answers only make sense once you've sat in the question long enough to feel it in your chest, not just hear it in your ears. So, sit with it. We'll come back to this. Picture a storm rolling over dark hills in the distance, the kind of storm you can see coming long before it arrives. There's a strange stillness in the air right before it hits. Animals go quiet. The wind holds its breath. And then it comes, sudden and loud, shaking everything that isn't rooted. That stillness before the storm, that's often what change feels like right before it visibly rearranges your life. A quiet unease, a sense that something is coming, even if you can't name it yet. You've felt that stillness lately, haven't you? Don't be afraid of it. Storms don't just destroy, they clear. They wash away what was dying anyway, to make room for what's about to grow. Here is the hidden truth beneath everything we've talked about so far. The people who underestimated you, the ones who walked away, who dismissed your dreams, who made you feel small for feeling deeply, they didn't do it because you weren't enough. Often, without even realizing it, They did it because your quiet depth reflected something they weren't ready to face in themselves. This is where psychology and reflection meet honestly, without exaggeration. People are often uncomfortable around emotional depth they haven't developed in themselves. Confidence that doesn't need to prove itself can feel, to an insecure mind, like judgment, even when none was intended. Stillness can feel threatening to someone who has never made peace with their own noise. That's not an excuse for how you were treated. It's an explanation. And explanations, when we're ready for them, can be more healing than apologies that never come. So, when someone walked away from your quiet strength, it's worth considering, gently, not bitterly, that maybe it said more about their unfinished chapters than it ever said about yours. Something else is happening here, something quieter than rejection or storms or closed doors. Life's biggest transformations rarely happen with an audience. They happen in ordinary moments, brushing your teeth and suddenly realizing you don't miss someone the way you used to, walking past a place that used to hurt and feeling nothing but calm. Waking up one day and noticing that the version of you who used to beg for approval has quietly, without ceremony, stopped begging. Nobody claps when that happens. There's no music, no confirmation, no proof. Just you, a little lighter, a little steadier, without fully knowing when the shift occurred. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know that's not a small thing. That's the quiet architecture of becoming someone new. But here's the tension you need to hear honestly. Staying attached to the old story. The one where you were too much, where you were not chosen, where you were left behind, can quietly cost you the very future trying to reach you right now. If you keep interpreting today through the lens of yesterday's pain, you risk missing signs that things are already changing. An unexpected message, a stranger's comment that lands at exactly the right moment, a small opportunity that looks unremarkable on the surface, but could quietly become the beginning of everything. Growth doesn't wait patiently forever. At some point, it asks you to let go of the old identity so the new one has somewhere to land. And here is where everything reverses. The setback wasn't the end of your momentum. It was preparation disguised as delay. The silence wasn't rejection. It was the universe removing distractions so you could hear your own voice again. The waiting wasn't punishment. It was timing, arranging things behind the scenes long before you could see the shape of what was coming. Picture, now, a mountain path at dusk, steep, winding, half hidden in shadow. A traveler climbs it slowly, breathing hard, unsure how much farther it goes. But just past the final bend, hidden completely from view until this exact step, the path opens into a wide, quiet summit, overlooking a valley bathed in gold light. The traveler couldn't see that view from the bottom. Neither can you, yet. But you're closer to that bend than you think. What begins to grow from all of this isn't loud. It's not a dramatic reinvention overnight. It's something steadier. It's self-respect that doesn't require someone else's approval to feel real. It's peace that doesn't depend on everyone understanding your choices. It's clarity about who deserves access to your heart and who was only ever borrowing space in it. It's forgiveness, not because what happened was okay, but because carrying resentment was never punishing them. It was only ever punishing you. It's confidence that doesn't need to be proven, only lived. And its purpose, quiet, personal, undeniable. The sense that your life is finally beginning to make sense in a way it never has before. Here is the final revelation, the one this entire story has been walking toward. They didn't write the ending of your story. You did. Every person who doubted you, every door that closed, every silence that hurt. None of them held the pen. They only held moments, chapters maybe, but never the whole book. That pen was always in your hand, even during the years it didn't feel like it. And that brings a kind of peace that's hard to describe until you feel it. A settling in the chest, a loosening in the shoulders. A sense that maybe, just maybe, everything that happened, the heartbreak, the silence, the underestimating, the waiting, was quietly assembling the exact person you needed to become for what's coming next. You are allowed to feel hopeful about that. You are allowed to exhale. But there's still one more layer to this, one more realization waiting just beneath the surface, something about timing, about the next few weeks specifically, that changes how all of this lands. We'll get there. Not yet. Let this part settle first. So here's a question worth sitting with tonight, long after this video ends. What part of your journey suddenly makes a little more sense now? Which closed door, looking back, might have actually been a mercy? If this message found its way to you for a reason, and something tells me it did, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you're comfortable, tell me in the comments, what chapter are you finally ready to leave behind? The universe doesn't always move loudly. Sometimes the greatest turning points arrive in silence, in an ordinary Tuesday, in a quiet decision nobody else witnesses, in the moment you finally stop waiting for permission to begin again. Picture, one last time, a lone traveler walking toward a golden sunrise after surviving the longest, darkest night of their life. The storm has passed. The pier is behind them. The mountain path has opened into light. They don't look back with anger. They look forward with quiet, unshakable calm. The screen fades slowly to black. Somewhere music rises gently, like breath returning after being held too long. One final sentence remains. Your story was never over. It was only waiting for the right chapter.